Okay, so I remembered to hit the record button. So we're already starting off good. It'll be posted right after class today too. I usually do it the day of if you need it. Like I mentioned yesterday, today is pretty much just a refresher of art appreciation vocab before we actually delve into the real stuff. So today's lesson is a bit boring to me in terms of like the normal schedule because it's just vocab today, which is dull, but it is what it is. But we are starting off today discussing specifically what art history is before we get into the boring vocabulary, because art history is a specific genre all on its own. That's different from art appreciation, it's different from art, and it's different from history. Its own little niche. So as far as like writing notes for this section, what I would do is if you don't remember what a vocab word is, write it. But other than that, you should be good. I'm sure a bunch of you will already remember what those words are. But this first section is just discussing what art history is to get you guys familiar with what our content is going to be about in this class. And to start off, I thought we could do a little discussion because, yeah, it's more interesting when you guys talk than when I do. At least to me it is, because I get bored listening to my own voice. So what is art history? I'll give you guys about a minute and a half to summarize what you think art history might be. And you don't have to write it if you don't want to. You can write it if you want to. Sometimes I need to write stuff down. Anyone want to give a guess?
Well, I'm going to be focusing down to the beginning of art, like culture, my saying culture, all of the basically pinpointing big time artifacts.
Yeah, keyword there, artifacts. Yeah. The art history is all about studying artifacts. That's a good key point. Anyone have any other definition or ideas that they thought of on what art history is?
Yeah, say like looking at artifacts and different pieces of art throughout history to gain more information about the people who created it.
Very good. Yeah, both of those are spot on correct. What do you think the purposes of art history might be?
Art in general.
Yeah, it gives us
history. That
exactly
shows
very
history.
Good.
So
yeah. Anyone else think of any purposes for art history? Like why should we be here today?
The art shows like that time.
Yes, very good. Everyone's right. Yay. Awesome. Okay, so that's good morning. Pretty much a summary of what we're going to be doing in class in a nutshell. So history itself is the record of past humanity, and art helps to represent that. It is something tangible that we can see that those cultures have left for us and the people have left for us. So it's a tangible history that we're going to be looking at, physical history, not just textbooks, other than we are using a textbook, but yeah. Yeah, it's objects through history. I'm going to use this because there's going to be a lot of those down there. So in art appreciation, like I mentioned yesterday, you learned how to look at a piece of art, study it, and appreciate it. In this class, we're going to be looking at the context in which the art was made. It's a little bit different from art history. It's a little bit more in depth, or not art history, but art appreciation. It's more in depth than art appreciation was. You're still going to be needing to use those analysis skills in this class, though. That is going to carry on, which is why today we are going to be spending time redoing that and making sure everyone knows how to do it and practicing it before we move on into the actual meat of the course. So this is the study of history through art, and it is very vital for this course to really grasp the history. So I'm sorry, those of you that don't like history, yeah, I'm looking at you. But in this class, we are going to be learning history, but it's going to be a different kind of history because we are looking at objects, which I think is more fun because I am a visual person myself, and I can get way more interested in dead people by looking at the objects they left behind versus just reading about them. I don't know about you guys, but I definitely care a little bit more, and I already like history. And it is art historians and archaeologists that are going to be playing a major role in this class. They're going to keep popping up in our textbooks, particularly really famous archaeologists and art historians. They have names. We're going to be learning about some of them. Because of them, we have all of these objects. And it's because of those objects that we know a lot about these cultures of dead people. Without those objects, we wouldn't know anything about them. And you're going to be learning that as we go around in this class. And for those of you who've never had me before, you're learning I have a bit of a sense of humor. And I like to joke about it. Okay. So different things that we're going to be looking at, obviously architecture. That's going to play a really big role early on. We're going to be looking at a lot of architecture. It can get a bit deep when we get to the Greek and Roman architectural sections. By deep, I mean a whole lot of vocab and a whole lot of different architectural schemes and plans. We're going to do our best to work through it together. If I can comprehend it, you can, because there's math involved, and Brendan knows that because he sat with me one day to do that. We're going to get through that together. But yeah, we are going to be looking at a lot of architecture, a lot of sculptures as well early on. That takes up a good chunk of our first section. And of course, paintings, drawings, and later on even printmaking. So just different ideas of what we're going to see in this class. Now, what classifies it as art? This is a constantly changing answer. If you remember in art appreciation, art is something that had no function. It was just basically for consumption of viewers. Art history is a little bit different because we're looking at artifacts. Artifacts often have a purpose and function, which is why with art history, a lot of people argue as to what should be considered art and which should not be considered art. For example, some art historians will argue that coins should be considered art because they were designed, there's faces on them, there's details on them, and some will argue that it should not be considered art. I don't care which side you pick, it is your own opinion. But we will be looking at artifacts like coins and pottery that had functions, but also had designs on them. We're going to specifically be looking at the designs used for them versus like function. Well, we're going to see the function too, but we're not going to focus on that. But yeah. So there's not really a clear one-size-fits-all answer for what art is specifically in this course. This is one of those classes that would argue that crafts are art versus like art appreciation. We didn't really talk about that too much. So yeah, a little bit different. And it is very opinion based, like I said. Different questions that art historians ask and different questions that you should ask. You should write this one down. Questions that you should ask when you're looking at an art piece on your own or in class. How old is it? That's a pretty basic question though. How old are you? Specifically in historical context and with chronology, because we are looking at really old objects in this class, we're going to be seeing a lot of approximation dates. Meaning we can't quite pinpoint when it was made, but we have a rough guesstimate of when it was made. And when objects were made can be really helpful in setting up a timeline of history, seeing what else was happening in the rest of the world with history, and seeing the context into which that artwork was made. Like, is there a war going on that created a shortage of metals and blah, blah, blah. You can usually determine how old an object is by analyzing the physical evidence left behind, such as a medium. Like I mentioned, if there was a war going on, there might have been a metal shortage, so they might have used marble or clay instead, because it was easier to find. That would be a great way to determine how old something is. Documentation is also very helpful. Documentation would be like they wrote a date on it. We're not going to see that very often in this class because that's a relatively new thing where artists sign and date their artworks. That's a new trend. We'll see that a little bit with the Greeks. A lot of Greek potters signed their artworks because they were really famous and they wanted people to know they made it. So we will see it on occasion, but not often in this class. Towards the end, we'll see it a little bit more. Internal evidence, such as hairstyles or clothing shown on figures or different armor or shields used, can usually help indicate like rough estimates on when things might have been made, because clothing trends change, hairstyle changes, things like that. And other things that might help you determine how old something is stylistic evidence, which means what style is it made in. That's not always reliable though, because sometimes people will pick up old trends. So yeah, first question art historians should ask when they're looking at objects, how old it is. Next question art historians should ask is, what style is it? This is just basic like things that we consider and that we're going to be considering as we go forward. So by style, I mean either period style, regional style, or personal style. Period style would be, like I just mentioned before, a specific style trend that was happening at that time, such as classical Greek art, Hellenistic art. There's different style trends, or high Renaissance, early Renaissance versus medieval art. Different styles. That would be a period style. Regional style is a style that tends to be tied to a specific location, such as Egyptian art. Egyptian art is a style that is solely Egyptian. It's solely applying to that region. And the last one, personal style. That is an artist's individual style that they themselves do and no one else does, such as Georgia O'Keeffe's flower paintings that she does really blown up, close up, big. No other artist paints flowers like her. Very individual style. And there's Georgia O'Keeffe's Jack in the Pulpit, also known as a calla lily, more commonly. And I am going to point out over there the labeling in case someone's forgotten because it's been a hot minute since you've had the label in artwork, but artworks have a specific label style that they should be done in. And I'm using the same exact one that your book uses because it is my favorite personally. I don't like the art appreciation one as much as this one. This is my personal favorite style. Artist's name followed by the title in italics. You'll notice there's a comma in between. And then comma date, the date that it was made in, period, the medium, and comma dimensions. That is my personal favorite way to label an artwork. A bunch of people have their own preferences. If you do it like the art appreciation text, which was a period after every single one, you can. I'm not going to be that particular. In fact, when I was taking art history, this would not have been a period, it would have been a comma as well. So you can do that too. But yeah, I care more about you guys labeling the name, the title, the date, the medium, and the dimension than anything else. And in this class, I have made sure to include the dimension on all of the objects we're going to be looking at because oftentimes when it comes to artifacts, dimensions are extremely important. And you'll understand why tomorrow when we get into that. It really gives you a sense of how big or small something is when thinking about it. And some of the things are quite impressive when you think about their size. If you just look at it first glance, you might think, oh, it's not impressive. And then if you realize what the actual dimensions are, it's really cool. So yeah, all of the dimensions are going to be included going forward. I didn't always do that with art appreciation because a painting's a painting, it's a square. Yes. And the last question that artists should, I believe it's the last one. It's been a hot minute since I made this as well. I made this last semester at the beginning. Is what is the subject? Particularly what are these subject matters being depicted, such as with Ben Shon's The Passion of Sacco and Vanzetti there. Sacco and Vanzetti was a big news story from that period. So sometimes subject matter that's being used in artworks can help us determine what the period the art was made in as well as what was popular then, such as the story of Sacco and Vanzetti. They were charged with murdering people and they were totally innocent, but they were charged with murdering people because they were Italian immigrants and it was easy to pin stuff on them. Yeah, if you're curious about them and what this is about, you'll notice Sacco and Vanzetti, they got the death penalty, even though they were innocent. They're in caskets there. So different subjects, particularly genres, portraits, landscapes, still lifes, can also help us when we're going through art history. Particularly, I'm thinking more like early art history, which is where we're starting. If someone does a life-size sculpture, they must be quite wealthy. It tells us about their family versus doing a really small piece of pottery as a grave marker or something. They must not be as wealthy. So a lot of times the genre or medium or subject matter used can help us learn about that person as an individual as well. We're going to see quite a few examples of that going forward, specifically in Egypt, Greece, and Rome, as they often left things in graves. Oh, there was one more. Who made it? We're not going to see this one for a while because a lot of our very first artworks, we don't know who made it. We know what culture made it, but we don't know exactly who made it. Because like I mentioned with the dates earlier, signing and dating stuff is new. Early artists don't sign things. We will see an example of cave paintings in which the artist signed things with a handprint, but we don't know who that is because it's a handprint. But they did sign it. So yeah, questioning who made it exactly. We're going to be looking at several artworks that are attributed to multiple artists because we aren't quite sure who made it, but we have an idea because of the style they used. That's going to happen a few times. There's going to be one artwork that we look at with Greece that the female art historians argue Helen of Egypt made it, and the male art historians argue that a Greek male artist made it. That happens because they didn't sign their artwork, but they both worked in the same style, and we can't figure out who made it. But we have an idea, which means that we're attributing things to artists. Attributions are when we can kind of assign an artwork to an artist, but we aren't exactly positive it's them. Oftentimes, if that happens, you'll see a question mark right after their name in the labeling, because we think it's that person that made it, but we aren't sure. So we put a question mark there. But we're fairly certain, but we're not positive. That's an attribution, assigning an artwork to someone because we think it's them based on style or context clues that we've been given. Sometimes artworks can be attributed to a school. We're not talking about an educational institution, though. We're talking about a group of artists that worked in a similar style or worked together. We are going to see that a lot with pottery. There are many schools of pottery that we just attributed to that particular school versus like an individual person, because we don't know who worked in that studio specifically. Any questions so far? Feels so far it's pretty easy, straightforward. And those are just different things that we're going to be looking at and thinking about as we go through the class. So if I was to put up an artwork now, these are, you would think of how old it is, maybe. You would think of maybe what the style is. You would think, what's the subject matter? Maybe who made it? Those are different questions you would ask. And last question, who paid for it? We aren't going to see this for a long time. You'll see it a little bit when we get to Egypt. Most of the art there was paid for by pharaohs. You'll see it a little bit when we get to Greece and Rome with some wealthier families. But usually who commissioned the artwork can help determine what the subject matter is going to be, such as the bust of Augustus there, which was paid for by, guess what, Augustus. So a lot of this early artwork that we're going to be looking at was commissioned. We're not looking at very many pieces that were made for artistic expression. We're going to be looking at artwork that was commissioned and asked to be made. Will we still see self-expression and stylistic choices? Yes. But subject matter, not as much. By the way, there's a ton of busts of Augustus. Okay. We aren't exactly sure which one's the original, because there's so many. And they're all very similar. The busts of Alexander the Great, we're going to look at a few weeks down the road. There's hundreds of those as well. And they're all kind of similar, but also a little bit different. So we have a guesstimate of what he actually looked like, but we aren't sure. It's positive. Just because everyone did their own little stylistic spin on it. Okay, moving on from questions that art historians ask when they're looking at objects to concepts of formal analysis. That's how art historians specifically analyze artworks, which means we're entering into the vocabulary section. But by vocab, I mean more like principles of design, if you remember those. Okay. And these are all the words. We're going to go over all of them here. But there's a whole list if you need a comprehensive list. There are 15. But like I said, we're going to go over each one, look at examples of all of them, think about them a little bit. And then at the end, we'll practice analyzing our works for anyone that needs a refresher. You shouldn't need a refresher since you just took that class. But everyone else. Okay, first vocab words, I just combined the two together. Forming, composition. Form is an object's shape. Composition is how the artist organizes whatever is on that art piece. So for example, here, the shape of this piece of pottery is a crater. That would be the form. Form is a crater. And the composition would be the organization of the slip that the crater is designed with. So those bands of geometric patterns and figures. Form and composition. You guys want to make those words darker?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like, I can't see them very well. I didn't know if it was my screen thingy because it's blurry or if it's the actual thing. Go. There we go. So form and object shape, composition, how an artist actually organizes that artwork. First two vocab words. Any questions about forms? Any questions about a composition? Just how an artist organizes things. Next vocab word, medium. We should all know what a medium is. A medium is the material and technique used to make the artwork. This is sounding repetitive because I just did this in the first hour. To me anyways, not to you. So for example, with Starry Night, over here, the medium is oil on canvas. Technique is how an artist handled the medium or material. With Starry Night, Van Gogh used an impasto technique, which is applying the paint in a thick manner. So that is how he used the material. That was his technique. And we are going to be specifically looking at some techniques that artists use to make different objects. Because a lot of artists have their own special way of doing things. If I'm ever going too fast, just stop me. We have time in this class to go slower. I'm just not used to it. And our next set of vocab words, align and a hue. A line defines the work's shape. For example, in Joseph Albers' Homage to the Squares, his lines form shapes that are squares. I love Joseph Albers, by the way. We didn't get to talk about him in art appreciation. I love him. His works are always squares. I love uniformity. Hue is the name of colors. So the hues that Alvarez used in this painting are blue and yellow, and I will go ahead and count gray and white in there as well, even though they're technically not colors. And if you need a refresher on what colors are what, primary colors are blue, red, and yellow. Secondary colors are orange, green, and violet. And complementary colors are colors that complement each other and work well together. That's not so much going to apply to us in this class. That's more of a contemporary issue. We'll see it towards the end of the book a little bit more, but not for a long time. Because a lot of the art that we're starting off looking at today does not have color. You won't see color for a while. And some more vocab. I'll make this darker and bigger. I don't like how light this is. Okay, texture. We're talking about texture, how things actually feel. Sometimes texture can refer to artists that paint things so realistically that the objects look like they have textures of metal and silk and satin. Sometimes we're referring to actual feeling texture of objects like fur, or with pottery. A lot of pottery has a specific texture to it that you can actually feel. Collage is a mixture of mediums. Basically a mixture of photographs pasted together. It is a mixed media of work of art. We won't see collage really too much in this class either. Space is a place in which objects are contained. It is also the area that is occupied by an artwork. Artwork can also try to allude to space. Yeah. Yeah. It's not my book, so yeah, you can see it. I found it in this classroom. You can't have it because I think I know who it belongs to. But I found it. Mass is the bulk or density of an object. So some objects can have a lot of mass, some can have very little. So we're talking about that crater that we looked at earlier. It has a lot of mass. It's really big. And volume is the amount of space that something can hold, or the interior of a room. With volume in this class, we're going to be once again thinking more pottery to start off with and the amount of stuff that it can hold. And once again, all of these words are just words that we're going to probably encounter going forward. So this is just an introduction to get you to understand what those words mean. But they're all pretty much just repeats of stuff that we've gone over before. And a little bit more. Now we're getting into like more complex vocabulary, starting off with perspective. Perspective is a way to create an illusion of depth in a flat surface. There's two kinds of perspective. There's linear perspective, and then there's atmospheric perspective. Linear perspective is something that existed way back with the ancient Greeks, but it was kind of lost to us for a long time. And then a guy named Brunelleschi brought it back to us. And we're going to actually see how he did that. Because I don't think my last couple of classes in art appreciation ever got to see how he did that. So we're going to take a little break. So linear perspective is super easy. He made it way harder than it needs to be with the mirror and whole thing. You just have to find your horizon line, which is usually right along the middle of your eyesight, and put a pen or pencil right up to the horizon line, and wherever the tip of that is your vanishing point, and every single line in your drawing or painting should go to that vanishing point. And that is how you make things look realistic and look like they recede into space in a flat drawing or painting. And that is linear perspective in a very brief nutshell. And a couple of you stayed behind yesterday. I had to do linear perspective in my drawing class, and I did good at it. And if I can do good at it, you can too. So I recommend trying it out sometime. It is actually really fun and interesting, and you'll be surprised at how accurate you are able to get your drawings by using linear perspective. It's a lot easier than trying to draw things just by looking at it. You get it a lot more accurate and realistic looking. Our next kind of perspective is atmospheric perspective. Atmospheric perspective is creating a hazy, foggy background to make things look like they appear further away. Unfortunately, in this class, we won't see that happen because that happens in part 2 of this class. But yeah, you look forward to that, I guess. And then foreshortening. We will see foreshortening in this class. Foreshortening is a way of depicting the body or a body part or an object and giving it the appearance of looking further away, such as this drawing here of the girl's foot. Her foot is really big, but as you go back, the rest of her gets smaller. That's foreshortening. And that's been around for a long time. So we will see that pretty early on. We're almost done with vocabulary, just a few more. Next one's proportion. That's the relation of size of objects to each other. That is Giotto's Madonna again. So obviously proportion's a bit off in this one. Sometimes artists intentionally make the proportion of things wrong. A lot of times in this class, it's because they're trying to portray hierarchic scale, which is exactly what Giotto's artwork does. Hierarchic scale is the idea of enlarging certain elements or figures to emphasize their importance. So usually the biggest person is the most important person. We're going to see that a lot in this class, a lot. It starts with Egypt and carries on for a while. So here, obviously, Giotto was trying to emphasize the importance of Mary and Christ by making them a lot bigger than everyone else. That's hierarchical scale. And now we're going to take some side notes into sculpture and architecture. Like I mentioned earlier, we spend a lot of time on sculptures and architecture. So just a little refresher on different kinds of techniques for sculptures and architecture before we actually get into it. So carving is a subtractive technique in sculpting. Usually used with harder materials. It's when you take stuff off of it. Like with wood or marble, we use carving tools to carve pieces off. Or hammer. Modeling is an additive technique. It is the opposite of carving. It is when you are adding to an object, usually used with pliable materials such as clay. And casting is when you are making a mold out of a modeled object and then casting or making multiple copies using that mold. So casting is all about making copies. We'll see that with bronze. There's a very fun sculpture when we get to Greece that they made the entire statue in bronze using the lost wax casting method. But they made his nipples in copper. So they're a totally different color than the rest of it. It's funny. It looks funny. So yeah, not always bronze. Sometimes it's copper. But mostly we're going to see it with bronze in this class. We'll also see other sculpture techniques like repoussé used as well. And when we get to that, I'll explain what repoussé is because it's pretty specific. And that's a French word that people aren't super familiar with. So a little bit more on sculpture, particularly relief sculptures. Once again, we see a lot of sculpting in this class, not only pottery and life-size sculptures, but relief sculptures. High relief sculptures are sculptures that are attached to a background. Well, relief sculptures in particular attached to a background of some sort, usually a wall. High relief sculptures are protruding more than halfway out of a background. Some parts of a high relief sculpture can be entirely in the round, such as if I was attached to this wall, but my whole leg down here is like out. That means this part of me is entirely in the round. It's not attached to anything, but the rest of me is really attached to a background. A sculpture that is in the round entirely or freestanding is a sculpture that's not attached to anything. You can walk all the way around it. Low relief sculpture is sculpture that's less than halfway protruding from background. Think of like a face of a coin. It's not sticking out very far. And if you forget what these are, I'll remind you as we go forward, because we won't see these for a hot minute. So you'll probably forget by then. And that's it for sculpture. Next, we're going to move into some architectural terms, and then we'll be done with the vocab. And our architectural vocab words have more to do with schematics than actual architectural vocabulary. We'll get into the actual architectural vocabulary when we're looking at the buildings themselves, because each building has its own specific unique traits. But some basic things with architecture, we are going to be looking at plans. Those are floor layouts. A lot of people are like, yeah, duh. But yeah, it's a plan. That is an aerial view of a building with the roof taken off of it, basically, so we can see inside. And next, we're getting into the food. Section is a vertical plan of an image that has been cut in half. So think of a cake. You cut the cake in half and you take one half out, you can see right down inside it. That is a section of a building there. The building has been cut in half and you can see directly inside it. And my personal favorite, the cutaway. Cutaway combines the exterior and interior view at the same time. Think of taking a slice out of a cake. You can see the outside of the cake and the inside at the same time. This is the easiest way I could think of to explain sections and cutaways. I mentioned yesterday I like to bake. I also like to eat. And I must have made this around lunchtime. I'm guessing, probably, most likely. Okay, so that's it for vocab. Yay. Back to why art history is important. Most of you guys already stated why at the very beginning on your own, which is awesome. Probably should have started with this rather than vocab to not scare you off, but hey, whatever. Once we're done with vocab in this class, there's not like a ton that we see again for a while. So that's nice. With art appreciation, it's just vocab, 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 vocab. It's not like that in this one. Art history is really important because it's very interdisciplinary, meaning you can use it in a lot of different disciplines. I like to think of myself as a bit of a jack of all trades. I know a little bit about a lot of things, thanks to art history. Because we are studying artifacts and objects that can apply to many, many different fields and be used in different areas, you learn how those objects were used and you learn a bit about that field along with it. It helps to expand your knowledge of not just history, which is the obvious one, but also fashions, social changes and economic changes throughout time, people, cultures, natural sciences, and humanities in general. So it can be really useful across a lot of different areas. At least I've found it's been very useful in my life. I'm really good at Jeopardy. But with this course, you will not only gain a wealth of knowledge pertaining to art, but a whole lot more, which is awesome. You'll also learn a lot about literature too, if you're into that. Okay, so keep in mind going forward, art is very arbitrary. There's a lot of opinions that come with art. There's some people that are very certain about the artifacts that we will be looking at, and then there's other art historians that would argue against some of them. You are allowed to pick your own thoughts and ideas. I don't. My opinions change all the time, so yeah. So yeah, you're allowed to say something isn't art if we're looking at it. I don't care. You're not going to hurt my feelings. Like I said, I specialize in contemporary art. This isn't even my thing. You will not hurt my feelings. You're allowed to think your own thing. You're allowed to see things your own way. It's okay. In fact, I value having a whole bunch of opinions in one room because it creates really good discussions. So definitely have your own opinion going forward in this class. Will I argue against you? Sometimes, because I like to do that. You're allowed to argue back. So yeah, because it's a discussion. That's what we're going to be doing. So today, just a little brief review. We learned what the class is about. We went over some of the questions that art historians ask, and hopefully you two will be asking by the end. Well, you should probably be asking like tomorrow. And some of the basic terminology that we're going to be using. And so hopefully as you progress, you're going to be a little bit more comfortable doing that. But we are going to try and practice it a little bit today because your discussion post has to do with it this week. There's two art pieces up here. They are very, very different. I'm going to have every single one of you pick one of the below, just one, and see what you notice about the composition, what you think. Use some of the ideas that I said art historians might ask earlier, such as like when was it made, what's the style, who made it, things like that, to analyze it, as well as maybe some of the vocabulary words. I'm going to give you guys about 10 minutes to do that and write your own thoughts. You can add your own opinions as well. That would be great. And just analyze whichever piece you chose. And I chose very different ones because I thought people might have a preference. Think about composition, form, everything. And if you get stuck, I'll be coming around helping. I don't know why I chose these two. I don't like either one of them. So maybe that's why I chose them. Maybe someone can see me like. Yeah, about 4 minutes.
Yeah.
About one more minute. Who chose the cow? Congratulations, you're in a group.
Oh, with everyone?
You three. You guys are going to meet together and share what you wrote.
Cool.
And you two are in a group. You're going to meet together and share what you wrote.
Okay.
All right.
So like, the first half of this one, I came from like, three bunches of different kinds of pictures. Like, this has just and tells us the person, the picture in the center, and like, the main focal point,
Yeah,
the
so
main
like,
subject.
we
She looks like, she's interested.
trying to portray that in the 1900s, not really considered art at the time, but we see it now. So,
Just like really looking at it, and then
I
like,
think,
there's a lot more women.
it's a personal, this is a personal
And it seems a lot
opinion
more
of someone portraying of the cat in abstract format. Abstract format, probably the word.
Representational abstract pressure through.
Yeah, there you go.
Don't give me credit, I just talked about this one a lot.
I know, that's what I'm trying to remember.
Because the 17th century, it's likely that was the English and French by the church. And then extended on that.
And they didn't mix the paint and charcoal, correct? Put that on the paper, was that right?
Yeah, no, I think that the really outline was from the first one.
Oh, okay, okay.
There's
This
not a lot
was
of
a series.
perspective in comments.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, he had like some crazy stuff. He went from like this
A
to
lot
like
of the times.
He started
this, okay. Yeah, and they had like the 3 blocks that were supposed to be a count. Looking up, it was a count. But it was a count.
Yeah.
So,
Also noticed
there's some crazy stuff.
domestic that one. For the most part, like not exactly, but it's pretty even throughout the
Yeah,
entire
it's,
thing.
I guess it's because it's on paper.
Yeah, I still have my classes, so I can't.
Kind of looks like you used your charcoal to
There's a lot more
do
like.
Yeah,
like,
Yeah.
frame it out. In a way. I think it's that green color.
So I think the one thing that was intentional is kind of like the way of the and then like elbows or whatever. If you know the character.
Yeah. It's trying to portray the,
I don't like it, like, I don't.
that,
I don't really feel.
I like the real, but
Like,
without
I
it
don't
being
mind the
real
color,
gold.
it's just so.
It's Baroque. Baroque was very much about being overwhelmed for everything.
I like the orange or whatever. Yeah.
I like Baroque, but I don't like that one.
It portrays
Yeah, this one, I don't, I just.
I mean, and
Yeah.
it looks like, yeah, but it's like way back before.
We're trying to create like added drama and make it more opulent. That's what Baroque is about, but I don't like it.
Minecraft.
Congratulations.
That's it, that's all there is to it.
You guys analyzed in our work, congratulations. Yay. If you can do it once, you can do it again. This is good, because you're gonna do it again. Because that's what your discussion board post is for this week. So this week's assignment is to do that again. If you do it once, you can do it again. So use those same skills that you just used in 10 minutes, maybe spend more than 10 minutes. Maybe you don't need to, I don't know. It depends on which artwork you choose, technically. You're gonna pick one artwork from chapter 1, which is what we're going over tomorrow. It's prehistoric, Paleolithic arts to Neolithic art. So we will be doing that tomorrow. Choose one artwork. I think I skipped some of the artworks in your book, so you can choose those ones that I fit to if you want to, or you can just do ones that I thought of. And use those same techniques to discuss it in a discussion post. So basically analyze that artwork. That's this week's assignment. If you're struggling with analysis or you're worried about it, you can stick around or email me and I can give you some easy tips and tricks for an outline on how to do it. But from what I heard, most of you did really well. I didn't hear any bad ones, which is good. You all sound very confident, which is also good. Usually with this, if you're confident in your own opinions and support them, or at least figure out some way to support them, you're probably doing a good job. Okay. And then that's actually it for today. Tomorrow we will be doing, like I said, chapter 1. It's another short day. So if you want to stick around after class tomorrow and do your discussion post here and have me check it, you can. I can check it before you submit it. If you're not sure, that's totally fine. Of course, if you need me, I will have office hours right after this class today and online from 4 to 5 today as well. So that's it. Stick around if you want, or you can leave. I don't care. Have a good day, everyone, though. It was a good first, real first class. So great job. I'm looking forward to it.
So 1 hour chapter. I just
Yeah,
don't know how long it's gonna take to download.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're going over it
I
tomorrow.
ordered it too.
You
I
can
just-
pick